Salut YouTube, welcome back to the Not Even French YouTube channel. Today we are talking about the series that you can be binging right now to be improving your French. It's so weird, we are going back to France in a few months, but I mean I haven't been there for almost 3 freaking years, but somehow I feel quietly confident with my French level, and I think it's because you have this daily habit when you're watching TV in French, and you know, with series you always like binge one extra episode and then another. So honestly I feel like I have been consuming a couple of hours of French per day, which is kind of ridiculous because when I lived in France I worked in English. I was at a big multinational group, so I worked in English. I had a lot of expat friends and spoke to them in English. Niels and I speak in English, and because I was missing home I'd watch a lot of English television, and now the roles have reversed and I have realized how incredibly powerful it can be to just consume fun media and to relax watching things in French. So I'm going to share with you some of my favorites that I've been watching lately, the really bingeable ones, the really addictive ones, so you can really get into them and just make French part of your day-to-day. Now what I will say is that some of these series that I mentioned are available globally on Netflix, but for some of them you will need the French version of Netflix, or you will need to go onto TV streaming sites directly based in France or in Canada. I'm going to get to that a little bit later. And to do that I use a VPN, which is called NordVPN, and a VPN essentially allows your computer to believe that it's based in another country. So it couldn't be easier. Just with one simple click I say that I am in France or I am in Canada if I want to access French Canadian shows. That gives me a French IP, and I'm able to access all of the major French television networks as if I were a local. So I'm talking about France 2, TF1, you know, you can really watch reality TV series, you can watch TV series dedicated for children, for example, if you're just learning the language. There are a lot of episodes with subtitles, it really couldn't be easier. And of course, if you want to watch the French, local French version of Netflix as well. And why I love using NordVPN specifically is because it's the fastest out there, confirmed by the speed test, because it has over 5,400 servers in 60 different countries. So there's never any lag, it's not buffering, it really is as if I'm still sitting in my apartment in Paris watching French media, TV, entertainment online. You can also share your account across different devices as well, so you can share the love. It works on Windows, Apple, all of the major operating platforms. And it's also really good for those of us who are a little bit conscious about data and about being traced and having our movements tracked online, because you have complete privacy as well with your anonymous IP address. So thanks to the wonderful team over at NordVPN partnering with me on this video, you get an exclusive deal. Honestly, it's less than a cup of coffee per month. You can go and check it out. You can sign up to NordVPN. They're giving you a massive discount just for watching this video, so go and check them out, honestly, and you'll be able to watch media from any country in the world. Alright, so now that we have you set up from a tech perspective, let's jump in and talk about the series that I absolutely recommend right now. They are so good. The first is called Les 7 Vies de Léa, or The 7 Lives of Leia. Now this is a relatively new series created by Charlotte Sanson. So the story focuses on this teenage girl, Leia. She is going through a bit of a depressive phase. She's feeling a bit miserable in life. She feels like she doesn't really have much of a future. She's not really good at anything. And in the opening scene, she's at a party, she's getting wasted. And long story short, she ends up stumbling across a skeleton, still wearing a bracelet. And she realizes later on in the series, no spoilers, but it is this missing person called Ismael. Now the story could have of course stopped there, but what Leia finds is that she starts waking up every single day in a different person's body and actually time traveling. So she actually goes back in time to the 90s on the first day, and she wakes up in Ismael's body, who is the person, the skeleton that she actually ended up finding. And through this time traveling and going into different bodies and seeing the world from different perspectives, she actually starts to try to figure out what happened to Ismael. How did he become missing? Who killed him? And it's this sort of, you know, murder mystery going on around that. There's also this aspect of sort of sci-fi fantasy, waking up in someone else's body. Now, I'm not usually into that, but it was so well done, like the sci-fi fantasy part. I usually struggle with things that couldn't actually be believable, but the story's so compelling that you're actually following it without sort of second guessing it, if that makes sense. And when she goes into the 90s, it's actually super cool because you really have this 90s aesthetic that's been really well done. It's also shot in the south of France. You have, you know, the Calanque. You very much have that south of France feel and vibe, and that's a really nice difference as well from the typical like big city, usually based in Paris kind of series settings as well, which I really liked. So obviously Leia stumbling across this 30-year-old cold case completely unravels her life, and the thing is that Ismail, the person who is missing, actually ends up being her parents' friend. So she starts to, you know, learn things about her parents and actually see them from his perspective when he was young in the 90s and that kind of thing. And what this means is that it's funny, but it can also be very emotional, very gut-wrenching, very surprising, and it really does take you on a very complex emotional journey when, you know, the people that she loves aren't necessarily who they thought she was, and so on and so forth. And so while it could be on the surface level just sort of a silly comedy drama, it's actually got quite a lot of deeper concepts in there, especially when you see, you know, how imperfect each of the characters are. So there's lots of secrets, lots of mystery, great acting. Between the time hopping, the body swapping, the crime solving, the 90s period piece, all of that, honestly, I found this a really, really gripping watch. Very, very cool, very fun, and an interesting twist at the end as well. So definitely recommend this one. The next series I want to talk about is called Drôle, or Standing Up, and it is about 4 stand-up comedians trying to hustle and make it work in Paris. So you have beautiful shots of the lovely Paris, but what's really cool is that, you know, almost for once, it's really focused on some nice diversity, like stand-up comedians doing the gigs, trying to make ends meet. Like the sort of lead character Nazir, he's like working for Deliveroo, and then he's trying to make it as a stand-up artist. One of the friends ends up going viral on the internet, and that changes the dynamic. And it's really nice to have this representation of Black, Arabic, Asian actors, actresses as well, also representing their Frenchness, because I do feel like a lot of French films and series are incredibly whitewashed for whatever reason, and that was really nice to see as well. I love the diversity, and even within the storylines you have this contrast of almost like this real underdog kind of Paris contrasted with this kind of bougie, bourgeois, upper class, very, very wealthy. So it does play with that really well. And also, you know, the storyline is just completely charming. The relationship between the friends, the acting, the stand-up comedy itself, like the awkwardness. It's very much a peep into the world of amateur comics based in Paris. And I've been in a lot of comedy clubs in Paris, and I think they captured the vibe and the camaraderie really nicely. Obviously, one of the key success factors of this particular series is the writer, Fanny Herrero. She was the showrunner for Call My Agent, which is probably one of the most successful, popular, most loved French Netflix series of all time. And so with her creative genius behind this, of course it was going to be good. And in very French typical style, it's not like a lot happens necessarily, but you're more focused on the life and the challenges and the relationships and the tensions that go on for these 4 individuals while they're trying to make it in the comedy scene. And that's what keeps you drawn in rather than a very dramatic and predictable story arc. So overall, I think they did a really great job of capturing quite a niche subculture of France while making it universally relatable somehow. It was super original, very authentic, kind of gritty. It wasn't overproduced, and then it had this light and easygoing kind of tone that just had you smiling the whole way through. Alright, so the next series you probably haven't heard of. It's not a classic sort of mainstream one that most people are chatting about, but I really appreciated it. It is called Montant, so Can You Hear Me? And this is actually a French-Canadian series. So the first few seasons I was able to find on Netflix, and then for the 3rd season you have to watch it on Télé-Québec. So you will definitely need your VPN for that to make it think that you're based over in Canada. But it essentially follows the lives of 3 close friends who are in a very disadvantaged suburb of Montreal, and it really zooms in on the highs and lows of their lives. It is full of laugh out loud moments, but also very dark moments as well. It's funny and it's sad. It's authentic and simple, but then incredibly deep. So it's a very nuanced series. It's definitely not light-hearted and easy to watch as such, even though there's a lot of humor and dark humor in it, but it does explore darker concepts like, you know, prostitution, drug use, domestic violence, and so on and so forth. But it's really in this friendship that you're focused on, and how these three women support each other and sometimes break apart and then come back together. And it's a very beautiful testament, I think, to this strong bond that they have to almost get through anything together. As a series, it is very authentic, it is very real. There's not a single person wearing, you know, too much makeup or anything feeling overlit, overproduced. It really does feel like you're on the streets of Montreal with these girls. And I think as you find yourself at the intersection of gender and race and poverty and violence and all of these kinds of topics, it's really interesting because it never tries to hide that, you know, they don't make these women as such heroes. It's very much the fact that they are imperfect, trying to traverse quite imperfect circumstances, but that's exactly what makes it quite interesting to watch. Overall, I would say that this is a very clever, well-written, emotional, and funny series. I think it does a beautiful job of balancing humor with some pretty heavy topics. And it was also very cool to listen to the French Canadian as well. Even my French husband needed to have the French subtitles on. The way that they use French, which can be a little bit more old school, I found that very, very interesting in terms of picking up on their swear words, in terms of picking up on their pet names for each other. All of those things definitely made me smile. And if you're into languages, I think you will enjoy that side of things as well. All right, next up we have Disbarre à jamais, aka Gone for Good. Now this was an interpretation of American crime writer Harlan Coben's novel of the same name. I think because of that, this series did get a lot of flack. Like, people weren't really happy with it. It feels like a bit of a 3-star review kind of series, but I honestly found it quite enthralling. There were only 5 episodes to get through, and it's also based in Nice in France, which is also really nice, of course, to see that scenery and enjoy Nice as well a little bit. So like any good crime novels adapted, it is a real crime murder mystery. So it centers around the lead character Guillaume, who 10 years ago essentially heard a big bang outside his window, like a gunshot. He ran outside and he ended up finding his neighbor, who he was also in a relationship with at the time. She was dead, she'd been shot, and she was found face down in the pool. Meanwhile, his older brother goes missing. There's a big mystery around it. It's never been solved. Fast forward 10 years later, one night his girlfriend goes missing. And he spends days trying to find her, trying to understand what her final movements were, and he starts to realize that he didn't really know her as well as he thought that he did. And long story short, there's a lot of links with his past and the present, and it all sort of unpacks to have a big twist at the end. I binged it. I mean, even if it's 3 stars and was a little bit cheesy and sometimes the acting's a bit like average, I found it definitely watchable and bingeable. And I definitely from time to time just need to see those series where the mystery gets solved. So this definitely scratched that itch for me. All right, so the last series I want to mention is Family Business. I have mentioned season 1 before on this channel, but they've now brought out season 2, season 3. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend it. It's silly, it's funny, it's a comedy. It's essentially about this family who hear through the grapevine that weed, that marijuana is about to be legalized in France. And so they start, you know, to get a head on the market, they start growing it, and it gets them into all kinds of trouble with gangs and international crime syndicates and all sorts of things. But it's the lead actor, Jonathan Cohen, who you may know from, you know, on YouTube if you Google Serge le Mito. It's Jonathan Cohen. He's a comedian. He's super funny and he really steals the show. But they all do that. They're all really hilarious. Loads of one-liners and puns. The French is definitely more advanced because there's a lot of slang, a lot of violin. But if you've got the French subtitles on, or even the English ones, I definitely can follow it. And, you know, I'm lucky because I can ask Neil, so what does that mean? but you can just Google it as well if there's ever that word that you just don't quite get. But it is good to know like everyday language, you know, slang, the way like people sort of chat towards each other and that kind of thing. So it's fun from a language perspective as well. But anyway, that is a lighthearted fun one to wrap up with. All right, friends, let me know which of these series is your favorite down below, or let me know if there is a series that you've particularly enjoyed and binged in the French language. I would definitely love to hear about it. Happy TV binging, happy French language learning, and I am about to go back to France, so definitely make sure that you're subscribed because there's going to be a whole heap of content coming out very, very soon. Until next time, I will say have a great week and à bientôt!